Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Tina Tehranchian. I'm a planned giving consultant with Donor Motivation Program in Toronto, and I'm thrilled to have the pleasure of talking to Jill Nelson, Associate Vice President of Estate Giving at Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation. Jill is a veteran of the industry, and I'm sure all of you know her. She has been very active. She's a friend of CAGP, on the board, an educator. Many of you have taken her courses. So Jill, thank you so much for joining us from beautiful Nova Scotia.
Thank you, Tina. It's wonderful to be here. And as you said, I live and work in Toronto, but I'm in Nova Scotia on vacation this week because my parents live here. And so I'm in their comfortable home and happy to be talking to everybody.
Okay, fantastic. And do you have your special drink with you, Jill?
I do. It's very special. In honor of Nova Scotia, I used the blueberry, and it's a blueberry mocktail mojito. And I know it would be a lot better with rum in it, but it's pretty good as it is.
For that.
Mint and blueberries, a bit of maple syrup, and some fizzy water to make it so thirst quenching. So cheers.
Very appetizing.
What do you have?
Whipped coffee here, which some time to perfect, but you know, the foam looks great and it's easy, really easy to make. And I made it with Manuka honey today, and it's delicious. So Jill, we are in a totally new environment after the pandemic. And I wanted to know how you and your team have adapted to this new work environment that's created.
Well, I think we've adapted pretty well. It took a lot of maneuvering right away when the pandemic started to get everybody working from home and comfortable. And one of the mantras that our leadership started with right at the beginning of the pandemic was, you have to look after yourself first, then your family. And if you look after those two, you can look after your work. And, you know, because they knew if you put work first, you're going to have crises at home and in your personal life. So that was a very important attitude that really set the scene for the whole thing. But, you know, there's been frequent re-engineering as we've gone along, as we've found things that work and things that don't work, and just keep trying to respond. But a year and a half in, I think we're pretty good at nailing it.
So what kind of technological tools and new processes have you been using for your team to stay productive working remotely? And which of them do you think you'll keep using even after the pandemic completely ends?
Yeah, well, you know, I'd say one of the first things we had to learn was the importance of a VPN connection and of a good VPN connection so that we could access our files and access each other. And we've been using all sorts of other tools as well. We have Teams as a sort of MS Teams as the standard of communication within the foundation. But not everybody in the outside world has Teams. So we had to quickly learn to use Zoom, which I had only used a few times before all this happened. It's hard to imagine a time that we didn't use Zoom, but that became a really important tool. And we are also working on digitizing all our files. So a lot of places had already moved to a paperless office or a near paperless office. We were just in the beginning stages of that, and boy, do we wish we'd done it sooner. So we had to move a lot of actual hard copy files off site so that we could work from home. So that's a top priority going into this next year. It's not really a tool, but it's important. One thing I think is really useful too is that, you know, I work in a healthcare environment, and what we've seen is that the healthcare providers speaking to their patients, they've realized they don't have to have them come in every time for a visit. You know, if you don't need to do a physical hands-on assessment, lots of appointments can happen over the various platforms that the healthcare groups use. And where I think that's going to be helpful for us as gift planners is a lot of people who would never have touched a computer for communications are becoming more familiar with it and more comfortable with it. I have quite a few donor meetings set up over Zoom with older people who are perfectly comfortable with it now. And I think I hope that will continue, because it gives us the opportunity to meet, maybe not face to face in person, but eyeball to eyeball with people who live somewhere that isn't accessible to us. And it will save both of us time from traveling, from having to come into the home. So I think we're going to continue to do that and continue to use Zoom, as well as other things. And then the other kinds of outreach that we've done involve things like taking our donor motivation program, our tax elimination seminars, to a virtual setting, to a webinar, which has been, I'd say, wonderful for our donors, because again, they don't have to go anywhere, they don't have to dress up and, and get somewhere. So that's been really good, and we're going to keep that going, as well as having the in-person, because there's nothing that beats the personal touch. And so I don't want to give that up entirely.
Yeah, it definitely has broadened your reach. And I think for your donors who have mobility issues and may have had huge problems coming to your office, or it would have taken a huge amount of your time to go and see them, it has been a lifesaver in a sense.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know when the pandemic is ending. Every day there's talk about another wave coming, and I hope it doesn't come true. But what does the ideal post-pandemic workplace look like to you? And does your organization have any type of vision for that workplace?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. You're right, and working again within the University Health Network, I hear we are definitely in a fourth wave of COVID in Toronto and in Ontario. However, it's very different, because the people who are vaccinated seem to be well protected against it. So it's not quite as fundamentally daunting as some of the earlier waves. However, we are also trying to plan for a future in which we can return to the workplace. And our organization, our HR group, did something really interesting. And I pass this along because you don't have to have an HR group to use this tactic. They set up a survey to ask people how they felt about coming back to the office. What were they concerned about? What has worked well for them? What would they like to see going forward? And instead of just sending it out on SurveyMonkey, they set it up and asked each manager to speak to their staff directly about it. And at first I thought, boy, who has time for this? This is crazy. We can just fill in a survey. But it worked really well, because I talked to my manager, asked me the questions, and I told him what I thought. And then I asked my couple of staff, and you really feel heard when you can actually speak to what your concerns are. You're having a conversation, not just providing your thoughts. And so it was very powerful. And I think it came up with more ideas that people might not have considered before. Some of the keys are, when we get back to the ideal environment, we need to be flexible. We need to be able to get back out remotely in the community if something else happens. We're never going to be so innocent again. And that it had what an individual's job requires may differ. I may need to be in the office, someone else may not. So let's be flexible that way. Don't have one standard fits all. And the other thing I've been thinking about recently is, we talk about, are you going to work 1 day a week in the office, or 2 days, or 3 days? Well, what if it was 1 week a month, or, every second week or something? Like we've got to be as creative as we can within the constraints of delivering the best service to our donors and building team relationships with each other. So I guess the answer to your question is no, I don't think we know what the ideal is, and we certainly don't have a clear vision, but we are working towards that. And since we started with a work from home policy before the pandemic, which was, if your job allows it, you can work from home 2 days a month. I think we're going to see vast changes to that. You know, many people working from home 2 days a week, perhaps. And
Very true.
you just have to do what works for your organization.
Very true. There are still many unknowns for sure, and we're all experimenting with these new ways of working. And I totally agree with you. We need to think outside the box and try new arrangements and see what works. And it'll probably be very different for every organization.
Absolutely.
It sounds like you've had good communication with your employees and with your team, which is great. But what about communicating with your donors? In the past year, what have been the challenges and what have been the opportunities that have presented themselves?
Well, I guess we all know the challenges. You know, it's very difficult to build a new relationship with someone if you can't go see them in person or invite them to an event. You know, our events were really the cornerstone of our program, I think, both for people who are prospective donors who we invite to the donor motivation program events, or we even invite prospective donors to some of our stewardship events, because we want them to understand what it means to become part of this. Some people say those events are going the way of the dodo and that we won't do those again in the same way. I hope we will. We have a solid core of donors who love our annual luncheon.
Mm-hmm.
So the challenge is in not being able to do those things anymore. But the opportunities really offset that, I think. The going online to do so many things, being able to feature someone speaking about our cause and invite whoever wants to come. You know, we can invite them by email, which is cheaper. They can attend online. So really, there's an opportunity to do a lot of educating about what our cause is. So that has been a great opportunity. Also, that we've gone back to the phone call as an ordinary, normal form of communication, which I was always a pretty big fan of, because so many donors really don't want us to come to their home, or they can't get out. And so building a relationship over the phone, it maybe I'm just showing my age, but when I was a teenager, that's how we talked, you know, for hours on the phone. And so I think that's been not a bad thing. We also have the opportunity to send handwritten notes, you know, and letters, and those things perk people up. They're a little out of the ordinary nowadays.
They're rare.
Yeah. So I think those have been good. Also being able to call someone and just say, just checking in on how you're doing. And that is sincere. It isn't I'm making up a reason to call you because I want to talk about your estate. It's, you know, I really want to know how you are. Very sincere, and a great way to keep that relationship going. And finally, people started organizing their affairs this past year because they saw how vulnerable we all are. And so that gave us all a great chance to help people consider putting a gift in their will to charity. It was an amazing time for CAGP's Willpower campaign to launch, for example.
Yeah, great timing for sure.
Just through the roof, yeah.
So sounds like, obviously, and I'm totally in agreement with you, that it's been a great time for bequests and increasing bequests, but how about general fundraising? I know a lot of charities have been hurting in the past year. We've seen dramatic drops in their fundraising results. How has Princess Margaret fared in all of this?
Oh, that's almost embarrassing how well we've done, to be honest. I mean, we've had hits for sure. And some of what has helped us is not something everyone can do. You know, we have the big lotteries, and those lotteries are essential for us because they provide unrestricted capital for research and things. You know, so many people who make personal gifts, whether they be a large gift or a small gift or an estate gift, they want it to go to something in particular. But the lottery money is just unrestricted, and we need a lot of that to keep the not to keep the lights on in the hospital, but to fund the research that's so important. So that's been really, really helpful. And I wanted to say that some charities seem to have started smaller lotteries or draws that have gone haywire. I've seen some that aren't great, but the foundation in Sudbury that encompasses their health organizations started a 50-50 draw, and that 50-50 draw is coming to, the prize is $600,000-$700,000 each month. So they're making a lot of money out of this. I think people want a chance at something good during the pandemic, and so those things have done well. Our events have been hit pretty hard. So although we changed to virtual events, in a lot of cases, they didn't raise as much as they would have if we'd all been in person. Now, they probably didn't cost as much. I don't actually have the inside scoop on that, but I would think not. We did our first in-person event this past weekend. It's called Northern Pass. It's a bike ride. And it was the first in-person event since the whole pandemic started. It was outdoors, it's cycling, and it lends itself. But isn't that a ray of hope that we were able to do that?
It was very, very inspiring. And
so many charities will be able to do that. And as far as major and estate giving, really those have continued to do well despite all the disruption. Many of our major donors became very, very quickly concerned about what was going to happen to cancer and cancer research during the pandemic, with the focus on finding the vaccines. And so they stayed in touch. We didn't lose touch with our major donors. And estates is not easily rattled by ups and downs and, immediate ups and downs in the economy. It's continued to be important to us.
Very true. So Jill, you mentioned some of the online events, but what new innovations, technological innovations, have you been using for fundraising and for connecting with your donors that have worked and you think you will continue to use?
Well, I think, the webinars that I mentioned before, I think those have just been a revelation to us. We would never have thought to do this. It took an epidemic or a pandemic to get us moving on some of these things, holding the seminars online and reaching out to people online. And as far as the in-person events, I think we'll try not exactly a hybrid, because I think it's very expensive to hold an event in person and have some people there and some people at a distance. But I think we'll do some in person and some for those who aren't comfortable coming in, at least for the first few years until we feel more secure. I think we've learned to reach out to our donors in a different way. This isn't high tech, but gosh, if you mail to people, mail valuable things, not just calendars or gift cards, with a personal message. I think they appreciate that. The other thing that I think we started doing donor surveys using the MarketSmart platform. That's a company out of the States that offers their services to Canadian organizations as well. I'd wanted to do that for a long time. It just happened that our launch of this came about during the pandemic, and it's been very, very powerful for us. So that has engaged people again in a completely different way on an online platform where we don't have as much conversation with them, but it's useful. And we will want to be continuing that in the future.
Okay, fantastic. In terms of in-person meetings and seminars, I know you hold this beautiful luncheon every year with your JCB Grant Society. We used to do the donor motivation programs in person. When do you think we can restart the in-person events?
Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball. I think it will depend on our ability and risk tolerance because, now hotels and caterers have started to be really flexible in many cases about being able to set up an event and cancel closer to the event in case of
Mm,
a problem. But really, what I think about is, will people come to the event? And so, until we've had a sense of how our donors and supporters are reacting to coming out in person, I would like to be kind of on the lagging end of that. Instead of being the bleeding edge of let's get out there and try this again, I'd like to see how things go. So I would say we are not likely to do in-person events, at least not this fall.
mm,
And but we might be able to start in the winter or spring if things seem to genuinely be simmering down,
mm,
with of course proper precautions in place. That's always the important thing right now.
sure.
So it's the donor's comfort and their safety, and also um, our own comfort in
Mm.
doing them.
It's very interesting. We usually want to protect the elderly, and they're more
Mhm.
vulnerable when it comes to the pandemic, of course. So the general thinking is that they're the ones who are the most uh, reluctant to have in-person meetings and would rather stay away from the public. So since this last reopening that we've had, I've been offering in-person meetings in my office to my clients. And the only people who've taken me up on it are people who are over 70. They love to come, like they want to see people and they don't mind at all. So that was a revelation to me. It's very interesting.
That is neat. I found just lately I've started to talk to donors. Well, I've got a donor meeting next week with somebody who we talked about it months ago. He said, when we're both double vaxxed, that's when we'll meet.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a colleague-ish who works at QE2, and he started to have donors say, let's get together, let's be
Mm.
sensible about it, but let's see each other face to face. And so that's nice to see that happening. And as long as you follow the donor, or in your case, the client's lead,
Mhm.
it's fine. It's fine to
Yeah,
ask. If they
yeah,
say
yeah,
no, fine.
as long as they're comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So this has been an amazing conversation, Jill. If you were to distill it and give us your top three
Mhm.
takeaways, what would those be?
I don't, I, as we're talking and we're talking about technology, I'm going to say that while there's a lot to take advantage of there, and I think it's really important for us all to embrace that, I also think we must not lose sight of the importance of personal touch and meeting in person, however we can do it. And that's hard because it takes a lot of person power. It takes more time to meet with people in person. But those are always the relationships that do more for our donors and for ourselves, for our causes. So I think it's very important not to start doing everything at arm's length. I'm going to email you, I'm going to write to you, I'm going to call you, but I'm never going to see you. No, we have to reincorporate that personal touch back in our world. So I guess again, it's a bit about being a hybrid,
Very
not, yeah, and listening to the donor as ever.
true.
I
Mhm.
also think, as I always do, that each charity needs to look at where their strengths are and where their opportunities are, and where what line they can't cross. So rather than say, oh, at Princess Margaret, they're doing this, think about your donors, your opportunities, and what you can do best.
Mhm.
I think it's very hard for us not to just follow the leader in these. And I don't mean to say that Princess Margaret's the ultimate leader, but maybe I'd be looking at Heart and Stroke or the Cancer Society or a university. How are they doing things? It's good to know and it's good to learn from it, but not to just copy it blindly, because what's going to be far more effective is what your donors want and what they can do. So I always want to say that, build on your unique aspects. Some of the people on the call may have been on the original gift planning course that we held in Wakefield a few years ago. And there was a wonderful man there from the National Ballet. And we had a running joke during the week. They gave people a nutcracker if they were a special donor. And it was, again, unique to the ballet. They didn't say, oh, here's a little plaque that any charity could do, but here's something special and meaningful from my charity. And I've always loved that. And
that is unique indeed.
That kind of thing you can learn from and do. Yeah.
And the takeaway that I got from your talk was that it's actually the importance of low tech, because we're all so hung up on technology and using new tools that are available, technological tools, but it's still important to stay low tech and stay, have that personal touch and personal contact with your donors, which would definitely be appreciated.
That's true. And while somebody might say, oh, well, you've got 2 people who can go out and meet with donors and you can see hundreds of people. If you can't do that, then you just prioritize which donors you ought to be seeing. And instead of seeing 100, you see 20 in a year, or 10. It's the importance is to not get put off by how difficult it is, but to take advantage of those opportunities that you have. And I think we have another minute. I wanted to show everybody one other thing about my drink. Can I do that?
Sure, absolutely.
I love it here in Nova Scotia. I didn't grow up here, but my parents moved here 40 years ago, I think, and they retired here 25 years ago. This is glassware. I hope you can see it, the light shining through the window. It's blue at the top and clear on the bottom, and it's locally made here near here in Chester. There's so much art and creativity and beauty here. It's mind-boggling. So my other message to all of you is come visit Nova Scotia when the world opens up again. It's a beautiful place.
That is on my bucket list, actually.
Oh, good.
Hopefully one of these days. In the meantime, you enjoy it on our behalf.
Thank you.
Wish you a really great vacation. Thank you so much for joining us in the middle of your vacation. We really appreciate it, Jill. And I wanted to thank all of the attendees today for joining us. We're right on time. Please make sure that you check out the next Campfire chat in September. Serena will be sending notices soon. So thanks again, everyone.
Great. Thank you. Really, really good to see you, and thank you for having me.
Same here. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.